water seems to be the theme today. Yeah. Have you ever thought about how strange water is? I mean, it really is magic. It's so much a part of our life. It's so essential. We just take it for granted. But around the world, a lot of people are finding ways to bring clean water to people who didn't have it before. So that's really exciting to me. One of our stories is that there will always be people in need. I think we should change that story. There will always be enough of everything for everybody. And we will love each other enough to make sure everybody has their share if they don't know how to get it. We've been telling stories all month. May is the month of storytelling. We have stories about everything. And we live our stories. We tend to outpicture them. They tend to guide us, lead us, and direct us, even when we don't know that's happening. We looked at, our first one was the I am story, and that's the story we have about ourselves, who we think we are in this universe, beyond where we were born and what our name is and that sort of thing, but who are we? What am I? That story runs everything. And then we talked about our trust story, because that comes out of the I am story. Who do we think we can trust? What do we think we can trust? What do we feel that is something trustworthy beyond anything that we can see in the world? Or do we? That's part of our story. So today we're going to talk about our money story. I thought we'll have some fun today. We know that prosperity is the all-encompassing word for flow, like water, for effortless manifestations. Prosperity implies that we have what we need when we need it before we know we need it. It's a wonderful, all-encompassing example of how Spirit works through us. However, in this culture, money is important. In this culture, money is a key part of our overall prosperity. And so we all have a money story. And I thought we might make this a little more interactive today. It's a little smaller group, so that might even be perfect for this. I will be asking some questions and asking you to respond out loud if you feel like it. No one's going to be coerced or called upon like in the 6th grade. But I want you to start thinking about this. What money story did you inherit from your parents? Now, I'll start. I got mixed messages, and I think I mentioned this when I did a prosperity talk a while back, that my money story that my mother told me was that, to my sister and I, you can have love or money, but you probably will never get both. Thank you, Mom. Now, I said they were mixed messages. She would say, now save for a rainy day, but you can't take it with you. She would also say, marry someone you'd go into business with, because marriage is a business. Anyone want to share their inherited money story or some of it? How many of you got the there's not enough to go around story? Were you told to clean your plate and somehow that would help the children in India? Yeah. Any variation on that theme anyone wants to share? The not enough to go around story. You know, that can really pervade your adult experience.
For me, I remember my mother's mother coming from Germany as World War II was gearing up, and the famine and poverty that she experienced before they left. So there was that big picture of lack, and then my mom passed that on as save for a rainy day, don't spend. And then my dad's parents went through the depression of not enough, and my grandmother became a hoarder. I don't think my grandfather bought a pair of socks for the next 20 years after she died. And my dad was the spend it while you have it, because that's what it's here for. So
Well, isn't that interesting? It's such a similar experience. And those stories really are an imprint on us when we're very impressionable. We not only hear it, we watch. We see what, they say you wind up doing what your parents did, not what they told you to do. Or rebelling against it, one or the other. But those stories come down through us, and we may even not be aware that they're in the background. It's like running in the background, and a running story that's prompting us to feel certain ways that we're not even necessarily aware of where it came from. So today we want to look at those stories. Anybody have a different one? Yeah.
You're only as rich as the
Has the what?
Fewness of your wants.
The few.
If your wants are few.
Oh.
Going as rich is the less you want, the richer you are.
Well, that's a lovely message.
That's my
Thank you, Bob. So glad you came. Yeah, that's a scary one, isn't it? Don't want too much. And that was another thing that I grew up with, because my mother didn't work outside the home. My father was a real estate broker, and it was feast or famine all the time. And he really had a consciousness of not getting paid for his work. And sometimes we'd be rich, and sometimes we would be fighting over a hard-boiled egg. It was that's extreme. And so I learned that to be a valuable member of the family, don't want anything. Be resourceful and figure it out for yourself. So I started babysitting when I was 10. And I made little flyers when I was 10 out of the cardboard things that came in my father's shirts that came back from the cleaners. And I went door to door all over 3 neighborhoods, 10 years old, knocking on doors, handing them this with my name, phone number, 25 cents an hour. I was booked every damn night. I'm not kidding. I was booked all the time. I babysat all the time. And then I would give my mother the money for groceries. Now, we lived in an affluent neighborhood. We lived in La Cañada, which is like upscale. But there were a lot of people like us that behind the beautiful facade, people were really scrapping. Those people came from the Depression. Our parents were all Depression kids. And so handling money was not something they had a lot of training in. And it is really, I can feel it from time to time, those stories coming up in me. One of them is struggle builds character. That's a very early American theme, like spanking makes kids better, that kind of thing, spare the rod and spoil the child. Anybody get the struggle part? How about hard work is the only way to make it? That's a very American one, too. It implies that receiving your good in life is difficult, and that there will be obstacles and barriers, and you must overcome them. It's sort of what Bob was saying. Don't want too much, because you'll have a hard time getting it. So struggle, sometimes we think struggle is a karmic lesson. That's a story, too, that comes from other cultures, but it's not a part of how everything becomes in nature. There's no struggling in nature. Spirit never struggles. There may be intense focus, like I always use this example, when a chick is kicking itself out of the egg or the butterfly is emerging from the cocoon, they're not struggling. They are responding to a natural push to be seen. And they are responding to a natural energy to move out of restriction. You know, it's like when a crab, the shell becomes too small for its body, it sheds it, lets it go, creates a new one. The snake sheds its skin. That is an ancient mystical image of transformation. Letting go of the old self, let the new one emerge. So the chicken and the butterfly, their success is assured. All they have to do is their part, which is to let it happen, is to let themselves come out on the other side. So this is called, in humans, evolution. We become too big for our environment. Have you ever had that feeling? What was that? Somebody singing? Have you ever had that sense that you were too big for your britches? Or been told you were too big for your britches? Yeah, too loud, too something. So in human evolution, we take leaps. It comes from an aha. It can come from trauma sometimes. It can come from restraint. We feel it as frustration and restraint. But a healthy mind will say, this is a sign that it's time for me to grow. If I'm feeling constricted by my environment, there's something in me that needs to grow, that needs to leap beyond where I have been in my mind, in my story about who I am in that particular place. So Unfortunately, if we have money issues or security issues, we might ignore the prompting. You know, I talk to so many people and friends, and they talk about how they just feel like there's more for them to do in life. There's something that calls them and they want to do it, but they don't want to leave this job or this relationship or this environment. Because they don't feel they have enough money. You know, a friend of mine recently said to me, "Boy, it's really great to have options." And I said, "Yeah, it's much easier if you have plenty of money." And then I thought, I better rethink that remark. I better think that one. Because we always have options. We always have options. It's just that it feels risky if we're stepping out without financial support into a new job, a new way of living, a new house, whatever it is we're doing. We need financial support. But people have been doing that for years and becoming great successes no matter what. So it's that old idea of you have to have a certain amount of security to try something new. And whereas Emerson says that's the last thing you need, is you just need to be willing to take the risk and trust. And this is where our trust story comes in. And trust that there is something powerful. Because money beliefs are spiritual beliefs. They really are. And, you know, Ernest Holmes said this is a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws. So behind this visible world, there is an invisible support system. And the law it acts from is to support the individual, to support individuality so that this whole thing can keep evolving and growing. What comes through us is a response to a demand we make on that law of supply. So it is never a response to a wish, a daydream, a hope. It's always a demand. People in spiritual circles don't always like the word demand. It's like, that gets all their superstitious hackles up. You can't tell God what to do. Well, yeah, God's waiting for you to tell it what to do. In the sense that it's already doing what it does, pouring itself through us, into us, and what we tell it to do is move in a certain direction. That's all. So that we individualize it. We individualize those traits, love and joy and peace and plenty and all of that. I picked up another book I love Edwene Gaines, his old friend, but she's so outrageous. She's the money minister, and she's just really good at it. She's also kind of a stand-up comic. But what I picked up from her in her retreat years and years and years ago was that you need to set goals. But goals are not inner states. Like, peace of mind is not a goal. To be kinder or more loving is not a goal. Those are things you could do today if you wanted to. You could be peaceful right now if you chose to, right? Those aren't goals, right? So goals are experiences we're not now having that we would like to have. I'll give you some examples that other people have told me. I have a friend who, her goal is to live in France for a year. It's a goal. I have a goal to have a book be a national bestseller and sell the movie rights. I have a friend who wants to be on the stage in Little Theater, but she is so afraid that she'll forget the lines that she can't make herself go try out. But that's one of her goals, is to get to the point where she can join a little theater group. I've always wanted to build affordable housing for single parents and have them like a cluster village kind of thing with shared resources. Now, I started doing this list back in 1975 when I was in my first Science of Mind class. I have that list somewhere, but I can't find it, but I can remember some of them. My goals were to live in a foreign country. Check, lived in Canada for 12 years. To have a TV show. Check, had a TV show in New Mexico. To have a radio show. Check, had a radio show in Canada. To meet the Dalai Lama. Check, several times. To write a book. Wrote 2. Check. To travel the world. I did. Check. Now, at that time, those were impossible to me. So outrageous. I was a single mother of 2 with no child support, living on welfare and working and sometimes my paychecks were bouncing. That was kind of, I had a really good money story, didn't I? And I was really struggling. Okay, so to write those down, every one of them has come true. But what happened by writing them down, and really it was part of a process of really looking inside, what do you really want kind of thing? Not just what would you, but what do you really see could happen to you, even if you don't know how. It sets it in motion. It's a demand. You're making a demand upon this unseen supplier of supply. You're making a demand upon the law of mind that turns ideas into creations, into experiences, into forms. And they begin to work their way into your experience. So we might, but I did, have some growing to do. The person I was then couldn't have had those experiences. I couldn't have had a TV show back then. But there was something in me that knew I should, or could, or might, or wanted it, right? So I definitely had some growing to do, but the growth will be part of the demonstration. We'll be led to the right person, the right class, the right book, the right conversation where we'll go, well, I just wrote down that. Something will start to cook. And for me, it took years and years and years, but incrementally, the growing improved the rest of my life. So I want us to get really outrageous today. Who's really willing to stand up and make an outrageous demand on this universe? Anybody? Yes.
Is it appropriate, like fulfilling life purpose?
A goal for you.
Yeah, fulfilling life purpose, getting to higher standards of living.
Yeah. You could make it more specific.
Getting the business that I want opened in
Yeah.
a community.
Yeah. Perfect. I remember a goal I had. This is really funny now. I thought if I could make $1,000 a month, I would be the happiest person on the planet. It was like 1970 or something. Well, that did happen, but it was like a little late. I was like, no, that's not enough. Anybody else? An outrageous one. Come on, let's be outrageous. If you were to write down something you want to experience before you leave this planet, what would it be as a goal? The fact that you're not saying anything scares me. Jennifer. You want to make $250,000 this year? Okay, you see, that's a real goal. It's real definite. Now, what's going to happen is the energy of that is going to start working on you. And I don't mean you have to work harder. I mean you will be more available, and you'll get more opportunities, and something's going to pop. It could be one sale. It could be a series, right? We don't know how. We don't care how, as long as it's for the highest and best of everybody involved. Okay, somebody else with an outrageous one. Yes, sir.
I want to write a book, and I think I put it in my mind that I will.
You want to write a book?
I want to write a book. Also, I have made my list. Like 25 years ago, I made a list, and maybe 80% of my goals that I couldn't write it, I've been able to.
Good. What kind of book?
I was just mentioned to my wife the title that I want to put the book is the Experience of Solomon, because that's my name, Solomon, and I want to write my experiences.
Do you write now?
I do.
Good. Start writing it. That's great. So what we do in this teaching too is not only I want to, but I am the author of The Experiences of Solomon, which is a best-selling book. Something like that. It's outrageous. You don't know how that could happen. So it's an affirmation, but it's sort of beyond that. Anybody else? Yeah. Lori.
I'll say I intend, instead of want, to buy a house at the Central Coast, all cash, by the time I'm 62.
All right. Is that like 10 years from now?
Like 5.5.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to live in Carmel in a house that I own free and clear, looking at the ocean. And I want one in Hawaii, too.
I want to be your neighbor.
Okay, you can be my cook. See, what comes up when we do this is people start to say, this isn't spiritual, or they'll say, this is too much, or who are we to do this? This is silly. It is not. Everything in our life that we have now came from our mind. And usually unconsciously. Usually we didn't know we were doing it. The story was driving it. And that's why we're looking at stories. Let's tell a new story about money. Anybody else? Yes, Solomon.
Well, I want to mention that I read the whole book of the books, Editor's Handbook, and one of the big messages that I got from that book was that your words are the law. The words, whatever you say is the law.
That's right.
Because if you say it, it's going to take place.
Yep. And fortunately, not everything we say takes place, but there has to be energy and conviction on it. Every time I have ever said out loud, that's what I want, it happens within days. Every single time. And I get to a point where it has to happen. That's why I'm asking us to push ourselves a little bit and get that energy moving, because maybe we haven't been working with these ideas as much as we probably could have in the last little while. You know, you get into survival mode, even on a high level. Well, I call it maintenance. You get into maintenance mode. And a lot of life is maintenance, isn't it? The car and the hair and the fingernails and the shoes. I mean, clothing and the dog and the cat, and everything has to be maintained. So you can get into that groove where you're not reaching out. And then the mind says, well, you shouldn't want any more than this. You're doing just fine. Why not? Why not have a bigger, even bigger life? Have a house in Central Coast. But you don't want it to be a Atascadero, believe me. I lived there. You know what that word means, Atascadero? Mud hole. So, just as an aside. Oh, okay, so anybody else before we move? Yes.
I just think about like later down in the future is creating like a holistic center that has like yoga nights and art nights and meditation nights and massage, just like therapy, etc. It's like a whole little environment.
Great, good one. I can't tell you how many people I've met who've said that very thing. None of them have done it yet, so maybe it'll be you. Darge, you have your hand up?
Well, it's not outrageous, but it's something I would really love. I would like to get a group of my really close friends, and I would like to be able to go to Africa for a month and spend at least 2 weeks working on either building a school or water source to make the water better, and then spend a week or two just really experiencing Africa.
You could do that. You could organize it. You know, if you get 10 people take a trip, you get a free airfare. You get a free trip. So just say yes to it. People are doing it already. There's a group of teens from our organization that have built 20 schools in Malawi. They didn't have any money. They raised it. So it can be a part of something that's already happening. So, yeah. Anybody else? Okay. So for everybody I meant to do this earlier, but for everybody who said anything, the rest of us, it'll be all of us. I want you to repeat this after me. So for Jennifer, Lori, Jay, Solomon, who else spoke? Lori, I said. Okay, say to them right now, I know that your demand has been received and is acted upon right now. Okay, so then I'm going to ask you guys, do you accept it? Yes. Of course. Okay, so you have the support. And you have the support of the people who care about you, people who love you, but you also have the support of this intelligence that's running through the universe. All right, so supply comes as naturally to us as it does to a tree or a daffodil, always supplied with what they need to be trees, to blossom, to grow, to come out of the hidden realm of seed and bulb into fully orbed beings, right? The difference is we have the ability to act counter to our demand. We can pull up the seeds, in other words. We make it and then continue to affirm lack. How many people have done that, even right here in this group? They take a class, you go home high, and then you start saying, I can't afford this, I can't afford that. You know, that is just mindfulness. And that's a habit that can be, it's part of the old story. So we want to reframe the story. A powerful way to release debt. Now, everybody has some debt. If you have a mortgage, that's fine. If you have a car payment, fine. The debt I'm talking about is the debt you can't pay, and it keeps you from moving forward. A lot of that in this culture. What will unlock it, and this I got from Ed Wein, but also other teachers. We need to make a demand upon ourselves. You might not like this one. That is to forgive everyone in our life for everything, including ourselves. The lack of forgiveness, if someone owes you something, you have a debt consciousness. Your debt consciousness is going to come out through your money story. That's the way it works. So say this out loud. I command you to say, I forgive everyone in my life, past, present, and future, for everything I perceived as a wrong against me. I forgive myself completely for all the silly, dumb things I've ever done. I forgive myself for the serious mistakes I made in the past. See, what we ought to feel is cleansed when we do that. Because there's nothing here but now. Can you feel it? Yes. When you let go of all that, you're still here, but you're different. You're different now. I know this is not easy because I spend a good part of every day forgiving myself for stuff and other people. But forgiveness isn't making it, we need to say this again. It's not making the act okay or right. It's not condoning the behavior. It's just letting the energy go that is keeping us from moving forward, keeping us from prospering, or keeping us from being healthier than we are. It's that blocked energy of unforgiveness is a killer. And it is an internal stress that will show up in our life, and very often in our money life. All right? So here's what we do with these things that have happened to us. And all of us have been betrayed, and some of us seriously. Here's what you do. You reframe the story. I'm going to ask you to think about your story. Try to get into the space. Try to start from this. Life is for me and never against me. So nothing that ever happened to me was truly anything other than a lack of awareness in somebody that allowed them to behave a certain way. It's not God trying to punish you or teach you a lesson, right? It's just we're all in this together and we're all operating from story and from levels of consciousness. So if you were abused in childhood, anybody here who wasn't? Or mistreated, mishandled, can you tell a new story about it? I'm going to get personal. In my case, my childhood abuse, which was sexual in nature by my father, the last person in the world you would ever expect to do something like that to his child, turned me inward to seek cause. Why do people do these things? I was a very aware little kid. And I could have done a number of different careers. I was blessed with several talents. So in my case, my soul came in to share this spiritual truth with humanity. This I know without a doubt. I had to turn away from, and this is what my soul was doing, I had to turn away from my desire to be an actress or a dancer or an artist in order to anchor my intention in this direction. Because of what happened to me, I became so self-conscious and so shy, I could never have gotten on a stage. I could never have gone to art school. I didn't have the confidence to do any of it. I became so inward that all I started doing was reading books about behavior and all those things, and putting my nose to the grindstone, as it were, to develop myself academically. But I let all that other stuff go because I didn't have the confidence to do it. So when I realized that my childhood was the perfect one for me to find my authentic voice, I realized I wasn't hurt or damaged by it. I wish it had never happened, but in a way, it did, for a reason. I think I mentioned before the book, The Soul's Code, by psychiatrist James Hillman, Jungian transpersonal analyst. He says every soul has a code. There's something you're called to do. And everything in your life, if you reframe it properly, you will see what's preparing you to do it. So don't call it bad. Don't hate the people involved. Forgive them. And if you can pull it off, thank them. In your mind. You don't have to do it in person because chances are they won't respond well. But in your mind, you have to do it. I had the perfect mother and father to get me where I am right now. And where I have been. With all those things that came true. And where I will go. The perfect story. I had to reframe it, though, because if I told it the way it happened, it was an awful story, right? I know there's people in this room who've had worse stories. So reframe it. Has anyone here reframed a story they want to share? Or are you in the... Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, so my big goal for many years was to go live in Europe. And because I had traveled there and I really wanted to do it. And then got to thinking one day, I said, what is so much better about being there than being here? I mean, I can be in Europe here. And I reframed it, so when I go for a long drive, it's as if I'm driving in the European countryside. It's really no different. It's just being present, doing what you want to do now.
Yeah, that's true. That doesn't mean you won't go to Europe. But I can drive certain parts of California look just like Tuscany, exactly like them. And some of it looks like Africa, So it's a beautiful planet, and there's many places to be, but right where we are is where we need to be at the moment. So it's what you're saying, what I hear you say is that you really reframe the story so that you can totally appreciate this moment without longing to be somewhere else. But that doesn't mean you still can't go, right?
Oh, yeah, no, and I did go, but I decided I don't want to live there anymore.
Yeah, you don't want to live there.
Right.
And I have a couple of friends, ministers, who decided they wanted to live in France. And so they sold everything. They're living in Lyon. And they're traveling the world doing seminars and workshops. And it's Jim Lockhart and his wife, Dorianne. And she plays classical violin. She does concerts. And they're living this amazing life, exactly what they said they wanted to do. They made it happen. So it's not about waiting for it to happen. It's being willing to put into place inside whatever needs to happen in you to facilitate it, to allow it. See, this is the tricky part for most of us, is that if you want to use the word God or the universe, always says yes. As soon as we make a demand on it, I have a best-selling book. It goes, yeah, let's do that. To put it in those words. It's only me that can stop it. Well, I don't know. I need an agent. How do I get that kind of stuff? We're the ones that put the brakes on, but the universe is always responding in the yes mode. Think about that when you make a big demand. I want us to really think about this. There is no power that says no. Think about life. It's always coming through, right? It's always coming from the hidden, from the invisible, from the seed. It's always popping through. It doesn't go this direction. Even when we die, we pop through into another dimension, if you will. It doesn't go backwards. It's not a negative. It's always a positive. I thought of this little, I'm going to make a bumper sticker. God has never left the building. I was thinking about Elvis. So if you want to know more about this, you can stay after for Talk About the Talk. We can get into it a little bit more. But in the meantime, set some really outrageous goals for yourself. Make a list of 20 outrageous goals. Not a bucket list necessarily, but an actual, put it in the first person present tense. This is what I am. And make a list. Demand to see them made manifest. There's some stuff in the Christian teaching Bible about this, like who wrestled with the angel? one of those guys. Jacob, thank you. No wonder your name's Solomon. Demanding a blessing, right? And even there's a reference to making a demand. And call, and I will pour out a blessing such as you have never seen. There's nothing in any literature that I know of that it has endured spiritually that says God doesn't want to give you what you want. Nothing. There's misinterpretations. But the mystical truth is the mystical truth. So forgive, be grateful, trust in the power that has always been in our corner, ever present, responding to us by corresponding to our most energized ideas. It doesn't withhold, it doesn't withdraw, it cannot divide itself against itself. It pours itself into our very being constantly. I love that song, that Ricky Byers song, Pour Yourself in Me. It's doing it all the time. But the demand has to be made in trust, trusting the invisible power that is underlying everything, to respond immediately. Trust it to respond immediately. Sit still and see if you can't get to the yes. When you make a demand, sit still and see if you don't feel the yes. You'll feel it in a click inside yourself. It's yes. And then you just let it go, and it'll play out in time and space exactly according to what is appropriate to your current state of mind. It never fails. It's what the universe is doing. So stick around afterwards if you want to talk some more about this. But thanks for playing today. This was fun. I really appreciate it. Let's do some treatment. You ready? So let's take everybody's desire, the most outrageous one we thought of. And let's know that Spirit has said yes. Yes, this is exactly the direction to take. My outrageous goal for this center is that it is filled to capacity, spilling out into 2 services, maybe 3, of joyful, loving, excited, intellectually stimulated people who have a sincere desire to make the world a better place for everyone. I see us with children and teenagers and youth programs and retreats and seminars and workshops and all kinds of classes and yoga and Tai Chi and music and whatever else we can think of. A real living, breathing center for spiritual awakening. I see it, I feel it, I know it's possible, and I know that Spirit has nothing but a resounding yes to that statement. And I know that whoever is involved, whatever it takes for us to grow, whatever we need to change in our thinking to allow for that to happen, we let it change. We let new ideas flood in. We reframe the old story and let it go. And we forgive everybody involved in keeping anything too small. And so I know that we are on the move. We are at a beginning point, and it's a very vitalized, healthy one. We are here to awaken ourselves to our spiritual magnificence and to let that be seen in the world. We take it into our businesses. We take it into our occupations. We take it into our family. We take it into relationships. We take it into public venues. Wherever we go, the presence is obvious in each one of us. And so with great joy and gratitude and cheerful anticipation that we are on the move, and that regardless of how it looks, it is happening. We are letting it happen. We let it be, and so it is.